Welcome to video number 14, part number 2 of data types. This video we're going to chat about PHP strings and PHP integers. We're just going to have a little chat. I'm going to try and explain to you the best that I can so that you can understand what it is all about, right? This is probably the most important section of understanding PHP, because if you don't understand this, then you're going to struggle to understand programming language in essence. But try and keep with me, and I'll try my best to kind of explain to you the best I can so that you can understand that. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to talk about PHP. So strings is a sequence of characters, like let's say hello world. Okay, so it can be anything, and the string PHP string value gets normally gets inserted via quotation marks, and everything inside of that quotation marks that you echo or print, like we said in the previous video, gets displayed. And that's the great thing about having a string value. Now in PHP you can actually go and insert string values into databases and call it through via echoing out that certain database content. Now before we continue with chatting about strings and integers and that kind of stuff, let's chat about data types in essence. Now, PHP stores whole numbers in a platform dependent range. Now, this dependent range can be like either a 64-bit or a 32-bit signed integer. Now, the first question that you can ask yourself is, what is a signed integer? Or what is an integer? Okay, now an integer in computer science is a datum of integrable data types. Okay, now a data type which represents some infinite subject or subset of mathematical integers. Now an integral data type may be of different sizes and may or may not be allowed to contain negative values. So now we know, okay, we've got certain data types, and we know that data types consists of strings and floating points and integers. Now we kind of getting there. Okay, what is integers? We know now that integers are kind of like, okay, it can be certain mathematical values, but we don't really know what a data type is yet. Okay, so let me explain to you a bit more. Now, we know that a data type can be either 64 or 32-bit, and that makes sense because you get your Windows operating system, which is a 32-bit and a 64-bit, and that kind of makes sense, right? Because now we're getting back to what is integers. Integers, 32 and 64, making sense, right? So the thing about PHP's data types is very similar to the C language long type. Now, assigned integers are converted to signed values in certain situations. This behavior is different from other programming languages. Okay. Now, integer variables can be assigned using either a decimal. Now, when we talk about decimal, we can get octal, hexadecimal, and binary notions, and it can either be positive or negative. So it can go in a positive range or into a negative range. And that is quite important, especially when we start using arrays, and especially when we get to the point where we start, inserting arrays into a certain point. Now, floating point numbers are also stored in a platform-specific range, okay? Now, they can be specified using a floating point notion, okay, or two forms of scientific notions. Now that's just fancy words of saying, hey man, this is an integer, or hey man, this is this is a floating point, and this floating point floats. It literally floats, either 32 or 60, but it can float up to the negative, it can float down to the positive, or float up to the positive and float down to the negative. And that is what you got to know, and that's what you got to understand. It's a floating point, it floats around. It's exactly what the name is. Now PHP has a native Boolean type that is simply either true or false. It actually comes from Java and C++ programming languages, if you were to know. And Booleans in essence are going from positive to negative. Now this is all looking at data types, and the thing about programming language in essence, and that is with PHP PHP as well is that you have, your data types and you understand the data types. Now, I said that we're going to jump into strings and and integers, but I wanted to make sure that you understand this first. I wanted to make sure that you know what a data type is. Now, the standard PHP library SPL attempts to solve standard problems and implement efficient data access interfaces into classes. So in the next video, we're going to chat about strings and integers, and we can have a look at booleans as well. I'm going to try and unravel to you this mystery of data types.